We are very quick in formalities and the pleasantries, so that we spend a lot of time in technical sessions only. Invoice management system is a new concept. It is an evolving thing. There are many issues in implementation also, and there are many complications also that need some attention and probably some resolution from the side of the department also. So while Shailin is setting up the cordless or the neck mic, many of you have already gone out to the restroom and they are back. Many of us had not moved from that. We are already 3 hours into the session. We need some movement for our muscles.
And very happy to be here. Special thanks to Avinash for conducting such a beautiful 2-day sessions every year and getting different eminent faculties across India. तूफान के बाद थोड़ा शांति चाहिए, so they said let there be a light session before the lunch. So they said IMS is a easy topic, simple topic, जैसे lunch की तरह easily digest हो जाएगा आपको. So we would be looking at the IMS जो नया concept है and how relevant that is for the day-to-day activities. It is not trivial like how the search series or any case files that we have looked into this morning. But most of the notices that has come or that some are facing, either on the classification issues, which is on the outward supply, kind of the rates have been stabilized. Only those who have availed exemptions are finding issue. But other majority issues are on the ITC, which says that okay, some amount of tax which you have availed as an ITC not there in 2A, supplier is not visible, or supplier's registration is cancelled, any of those things. So we would be looking at what is now this new chapter, the IMS that has come, how well you should be advising your clients on implementing IMS in the availment of input tax credit. IMS stands for Invoice Management System, though it has specifically not to do with the input tax, but it is about managing invoices. So first and foremost, I want you to understand that it is invoice management. The usual flow of the availment of ITC was from the e-invoice to GSTR1 to the 2A and 3B. And it was the 2B which was determining factor and 2A was there for some time, but filing of R1. So the conditions were given under 16.2 with the 2AA and the new B which got introduced. The role of IMS is managing the invoice. Now when we say managing the invoice, I as a supplier am issuing the invoice. So I am aware of the invoice. Who is not aware of the invoice is the recipient. So the recipient has to manage the invoice that has been issued by the supplier. Now I as a supplier, even I wouldn't be aware whether that invoice that I have raised has been accepted and the credit has been availed or not accepted, or what is the status of it, I will not be aware. So the supplier is also not aware after issuing the invoice what's happening to that invoice. So the invoice management system is both for the supplier and for the recipient. It's not just the recipient, it is, firstly you should know it is both for the supplier and the recipient. Basically it has been brought in order to improve the ITC availment system amongst various countries where the GST has been introduced. They were never into the invoice level management, and the India we always wanted to have GSTR 2 and 3 at doing an invoice level management, and with the IMS introduction, we are now going back to the original thought of what the availment of ITC at invoice level has to be. That is where era we are moving into. So the IMS is both for the supplier and for the recipient. This is a fundamental concept that I want everyone to be aware of. I'm sure you are aware of IMS, but some points which you should be knowing now going forward, I want to bring forth in the discussion. So it's both for the supplier and the recipient, and not just the recipient. With the introduction of IMS, what is the change that's happening? The flow which is usually, which was from GSTR 1, and we were taking credits maybe till 2018 August, which was basis books of accounts. Then 2A came in for a period of 3 years we were with the 2A. Then 2B came in, so 2A was put to dustbin, and they said that 2B is only the basis for availing the credit. Now the IMS has come in. So what will be the flow with the IMS? Two other fundamental points you should know. Relevance of 2A and 2B even after IMS being there is also something one should be knowing. Let's now first look at the flow of transactions for the IMS. With the e-invoice being there, which is now the limit has been made to 5 crores, so at least 70-80% of the taxpayers are under the e-invoice net. So on a real-time basis, when an invoice has been issued, that invoice is reported into R1 on a near real-time basis. R1 and 2A are mirror replica, so the data which is there in GSTR1 is also there in 2A. Any data which is there in R1 is there in 2A. Now, the relevant R1 will be the relevant 2A. For example, in the month of say Jan 25, when you are filing any data, the relevant 2A will be Jan 2A. Even if I am reporting an invoice of December, or even if I am reporting an invoice of September, so 2A is the mirror replica of R1. We all know 2B is a static report. Like 2A is like our P&L income report, 2B is like our bank statement. So 2B freezes the data only those 2As which have been R1s which have been filed by 11th, or if it is IFF by 13th, only that data would be there in the 2B. The balance data will be traveling to the next period 2B. But 2A will, irrespective of the filing of R1, whether filed or not, the data would be there in 2A. Irrespective if it is filed after 2 months or 3 months, it would still be there in the same month 2A. So 2A is kind of your P&L account and 2B is like your bank statement. It is an analogy to understand. Now what does this IMS will now intervene into the system? Firstly, any record which is there into the GSTR1, please note any record which is there in GSTR1 is in IMS. IMS is the invoice management system, so R1 is your list of invoices, the custodian of invoices, so those records are there in your IMS. Now, except some records which will not flow into IMS is RCM invoices or ineligible ITC, which you don't need to take an action. There are 2 ineligible ITCs as per the portal. When we say ineligible ITC in the law, we only look from 17 subsection 1, 2 and 5. But from the portal perspective, a record is called ineligible where the place of supply is not the location of recipient. Like those who have come, let's say from Delhi and Maharashtra, some other place, staying in a hotel for this event. So the place of supply of the hotel is of Gujarat. So those records, even though it is there in the R1 of the hotel, even though it is there in your GSTR 2A, for the purpose of the GSTN, it is an ineligible credit since you are from either Delhi, Maharashtra. So those records doesn't need any action of yours, and it will be directly traveling to table 4D2 of GSTR 3B, and it is an ineligible credit, so it will not be coming into IMS. That's the first thing. Another records that will not come into your IMS is a time barred invoices. Availment of an ITC is by 30th November. Now, if you have to avail by 30th November, record should also be there into the system by 30th November. So for the financial year 23-24, a March 24 record, if someone is filing R1 now, they can still file a belated R1s. If someone is filing an R1 now, those records are presumed you are losing the credit would not be available, it will not flow to your IMS. So this would be categorized as ineligible ITC. Now the records which have flown into IMS, you have 4 different actions you can take. First, you can reject a record. You can say this record doesn't belong to me, and you can reject the record. Now, in GSTR 2B, it will be stated that okay, these are rejected records. What happens is it would also be traveling back to the supplier dashboard saying something are recorded. And if the rejection is a credit note, then in the GSTR 3B also it would be impacted. So a credit note has, as a supplier, my liability got reduced and I have issued the credit note. You as a recipient, rather than reversing the ITC, you have rejected the credit note. So the liability will be traveling back to my GSTR 3B. Of course, it would happen into the next month. So a credit note of December, and I am filing on 20th of Jan my December 3B. So in the month of February, the credit notes which were rejected by you of Jan gets added to my GSTR 3B. Currently, your GSTR 3B is in a mode of edit. Even though a data which is auto-populated from your R1 and 2B, you can still edit 3B. GSTN had issued an advisory in June of last year saying that they would be moving towards locking the system. Then again they have withdrawn that temporarily it wouldn't be locked, but we will notify when it would be locked. After the IMS, the 55th GST Council also gave the blessings, because like Jatin Bhai is the first one who will answer what is IMS when there is nothing in the act, nothing in the rules, why are you worried? So we shouldn't be worried of any of this, because government, whatever the points you would mention, they would bring into the provisions of the law at one or the other points. Now the IMS will also come into the rule book, and the data going to 2B is from the IMS. Once the IMS is implemented, right now the trial phase is moving, their first attempt is they will be freezing GSTR 1 related liability in 3B. So table 3.1 will get locked. That is why they have introduced GSTR 1A, saying that if you still want to make any changes, you will be making the changes in 1A. The shelf life of GSTR 1A is between GSTR 1 and 3B. The taxes that I am paying in the current month, मान लीजिए I have a liability of 1 crore turnover and 18 lakhs. Erroneously, I filed a nil return. So I still have to add to my tax liability because 3B is getting locked. So you will be using 1A to adjust any liability. So if you want to make any correction in the liability, you will be using GSTR 1A. What you cannot do in your 1A is anything that do not have an impact on the liability. For example, I have issued an invoice in the name of Jatin Harjai. Let's say it should have been Jatin Christopher. I cannot change that in GSTR 1A because my liability is not getting changed. So my amendment tables, which is table 9 or table 10 of R1, will still be there. So in the subsequent month, I would be making those amendments. So the 3B is likely to get locked for liability when? Very soon. So I have first action, which is reject. Second action is accept. Now there is one more action, which is no action. Even if you don't take an action for the purpose of GSTM, that is an action. The action you have taken is you choose not to act. And the last action you can take is keep it pending. Now, the records will be traveling to GSTR 2B. that records would be traveling to GSTR 2B is rejected, accepted, and you didn't do any action. No action is deemed as accepted. These records would be traveling to your GSTR 2B. Now, this GSTR 2B is the final 2B before you file your 3B. That means every month you will have two 2Bs. 2B number 1, which is auto-populated, auto-generated on 14th, 13th midnight of thing. So on 14th, whatever the GSTR 2B that you get is a draft GSTR 2B. Earlier, people used to do a reconciliation of books versus 2A, then they said books versus 2B. Do not do any reconciliation of books versus 2B because it is a draft 2B. That is not the 2B that you are filing now. You now have to do a reconciliation of books versus IMS going forward. Alright? Once you have done, before you file your GSTR 2B, you still have to hit this recompute button. That is when you will get a new balance that is eligible for the credit. So what goes to GSTR 3B is still the balance in 2B. You can now relate 2B as the quantum that is eligible for you to avail the credit. So 2B is more to do with knowing end of the month, because on 20th, how much ITC I am going to take is what 2B is going to say. So what goes into IMS is a journey. You will have some opening records, which is not there in 2B. So why I am saying that you will not reconcile with the 2B is, you will reconcile with IMS. Whatever the records you have marked as pending in the previous month, a record that you have marked as a pending in the previous month, the records are still there in your IMS, they are not there in 2B. If you, let's say, download a GSTR 2B for the month of January and try to file, you are ignoring the records that you have kept pending in the earlier months. That did not travel to 2B then, that will also not travel to 2B unless you finalize. These are your opening balance of the records of your IMS. These opening balances are added with the new records that are generated by way of uploaded. Now, what will move out from IMS and travel to 2B final is wherever you have made as accepted, you didn't take any action and you are finalizing, which means deemed accepted. Those records will be moved to 2B. So from IMS that will be moving out. And if you are specifically marking as rejected, that the supplier's dashboard will have two things: all records and rejected records. Your closing balance of IMS is all the records that you have marked specifically pending for the month will be again carried to the next month. So a record of the previous month had come to the current month IMS. I again marked it as pending, it would be traveling to the next month IMS. This is another point that you should know. People may have a question that we have an option called 4B2, which is a temporary reversal in GSTR 3B. Whenever you report any value in 4B2, it will be reported and recorded in ECRS, Electronic Credit Reversal Reclaim Statement. Is there any difference between the record which is marked as pending in IMS vis-a-vis 4B2? One important point you should note is from the availment of the time limit. 16 subsection 4, 30th November is applicable to the pending records also. If you do not take any action, the record is continuously kept pending. After 30th November, it would move out of your IMS, it would be traveling to ineligible credits. While a credit has been availed and temporarily reversed, the time limit of 16.4, you have fulfilled the conditions of the availment, you have reversed it, you will again re-avail at a later point. So the question comes, which records I would mark it as pending and which records I would still keep it as 4B2. Those which is there in the books and you still are yet to comply with the provisions of 16 subsection 2, you will accept those records, travel to your GSTR 3B. In 3B, you will keep them as temporary reversal under 4B2. Suddenly, someone has uploaded a record, someone has uploaded an invoice, and not sure next month he might be reversing that invoice. So, if you are now accepting it, what will happen on the credit note issued by the supplier in the next month? Let's imagine this situation. It would be applicable for ineligible credits also. That is why temporarily 3B is not logged for input tax credit. Think of a situation that I have received an invoice in my 2B which doesn't pertain to me. Like erroneously I have issued it into Jatin Harja instead of Jatin Christopher. So for Jatin Harja, that invoice doesn't pertain to him. So ITC is not eligible by him. Going by the CBIC circular, I would report that in my 4A file and reverse it in 4B1. So I have not availed the credit. Alright. But next month the supplier has issued a credit note for it. Supplier has issued a credit note for it. Original invoice I have accepted and reversed the credit under permanent reversal 4B1. Now the supplier has issued a credit note. Now if I accept that credit note, my regular credit which is otherwise eligible will reduce. If I reject that credit note or supplier, his liability will not come down. He has issued a revised invoice to the actual recipient, so he will now end up paying double taxes. So the current advisory status is, okay, you accept the credit note. The moment you accept the credit note is not a reversal of the credit, it is reduction of the credit. Your 4A5, the credit which you are availing balance will be coming down. You got to restate the balance in your 4A5 manually. But if a record which is in your pending, you can reject both the original invoice and the credit note. So these are some challenges that exist. And the records which will not be there in IMS are ISD records, or the RCM records, or ineligible records wouldn't be there in your IMS. This you should be aware of. The various action, the status I have explained. Let's get into little deeper for some of the FAQs. Both, the view is both for the supplier and the recipient also. So this is another point you should know. IMS is not for the ITC, it is just managing the invoices. So you are allowing the ITC to flow to 2B through the IMS. Let's look more from the inward side. So when you log into the portal, you will be able to see all the records, and in the dashboard you will actually see all those 4 actions. Either you haven't taken any action, you have accepted it, rejected it, or you kept pending. By record, you will be able to see all the inward supplies that you have received. And against the line items, when you actually want to take an action, you will have those action called accept, reject, pending. And if you have not taken any action, that is deemed accepted. So another, the legal thing which people say that, okay, you have a doubt, you do nothing. Now you do nothing, it is deemed accepted. It will be written as deemed accepted. You can always say, I have not done anything, the credit has automatically flown into 2B. You cannot penalize. Now you may argue that. Again, they would say an ineligible record that you have availed. So that is why the status would be known for each of everything. The moment you mark any action, on the right side you will see whether it has been accepted, rejected. It would be shown for every item. Now you may say that I have list of invoices, how do I take an action? It is you are increasing the compliance burden. Definitely IMS is going to increase the compliance burden. That is why I always tell people that always use a software. Whether you are dealing with 10 records or 1000 records, having a software is always a mandatory. Whatever be the software, desktop, cloud, smaller, bigger, doesn't really matter. This is not our job to do. When matching of the records, it is the job of the machines, let the machines do. However, the portal also given a filtration. It says you can top left, select all and click one button called accept. I am giving you some easy facility, you can do it. Or you want to select records by date range. I want to see invoices of 1st to 5th December. You can go by date range. You can also filter it, but by the state code, by the vendor, by the GSTN. So they have given whatever the fields that you are seeing on the top, they have given a filter basis all of that. You can do a filter based on the place of supply, basis the invoice type or the GSTN of the supply. They have given a filtration of all this. Now, in terms of the flow of the records, what would be moving out of the IMS is all those you have clicked action, accepted, deemed accepted, rejected. Whatever you are marking it as pending, that means these records are traveling to the next month IMS. So this is specifically I am stating because next month 2B will not carry these records unless you take an action in the IMS as accept. Till then those records will not be traveling into 2B. So now imagine a record which you have accepted. Having accepted, will the record travel to 2B? Yes or no? There will be situations where even though you have accepted, it will not be there in 2B. Now, मैंने accept कर दिया, सामने वाले R1 late कर दिया. It's like I have accepted in the IMS. But the party did not file the R1 by 11. Even then it will not go to 2B. So for the record to go into 2B, you should also accept it. He should also file the R1 by 11. Now what will happen if the R1 is filed late? It will travel to 2B, but it will travel to the next month to 2B. So this is also another thing. So it moved out of IMS. After doing the matching of the record, the moment you have accepted, it moved out of the IMS. It moved to the next month to be. Whatever you kept pending went to next month IMS. Now look at the scenarios. So while you are doing the reconciliation with the books of accounts, if you are using 2B as the basis, then the record is not there. You say I have accepted it. Now that is where now you have to come to a position saying that I will stop using 2B as a basis of my reconciliation, start using IMS as a basis of reconciliation. If you use 2B as a basis of reconciliation, some records, those records which I kept as pending, in the next month I will have to borrow those records into 2B for doing the reconciliation, because in the next month 2B you will only have the next month pertaining records. This is another issue that you need to look into it. So there is a concept of draft GSTR 2B and the final GSTR 2B. So only the final 2B will give you the final records where you will be able to take the credit. So how do I generate the final 2B? There is a compute button. You have to hit the compute button, only then the final 3B gets generated. So in your GSTR 2B, at the right bottom corner, there is something called compute GSTR 2B, only then it would get generated. This is on the supplier side. From the recipient side, from the supplier's perspective, pretty simple. You will be seeing all records, but specifically what I want to highlight is the rejected records. That is where, so the supplier need to be aware of the records that are rejected. Even the supplier has those view where can I see the same state, filter status has been given. So he will be able to see whether any record has been accepted or if no action is taken. Against each record, the specific visibility is made, accepted, not accepted. Let's move to certain quick FAQs. Firstly, filing of returns are sequential. You cannot file 3B without filing R1. You cannot file next month R1 without filing the previous month 3B. Likewise, 2B will not get generated. 2B will not get generated if the previous month 3B is not filed. So these have been made sequential. There is a concept of editing a record. Now, while I do an e-invoice, erroneously errors would happen. E-invoice shelf life is 24 hours. How do I correct? Either I can cancel it within 24 hours, or I go back to GSTR1. In GSTR1, manually I will make an edit. So the edit of a record can happen in the same month, or the edit of a record can happen in the subsequent month. So both editing is permitted. I will come back onto the action, what will happen. Couple of things you cannot keep pending. Credit note cannot be kept pending. Current month you have to take an action on credit notes. Like supplier has reduced the liability, recipient is not willing to reduce the ITC, government cannot be at a loss of it, so a credit note cannot be kept pending. Your invoices you can keep it pending, credit note or upward amendment or downward amendment of the credit notes cannot be kept pending. If you want to act on an amendment record, you can keep original record pending and accept the amended record. Both status has to be same. So credit notes are the only important thing. Now you are not sure whether the credit belongs to you or credit note belongs to you or not. I want to keep it pending. Like supplier has issued an invoice for 1 lakh rupees and I am seeing a credit note of 10,000 rupees. I am seeing both in the same month. I really don't know whether I have to pay to the supplier either 1 lakh or 90,000. I will accept the ITC full value, but I will keep the credit note pending, not for the permitted. You can keep the 1 lakh ITC pending, but you can reject the IT credit note or accept the credit note. That is permitted. So this is something you should be knowing, that if there are any credit notes, the action has to be taken then and there. Now, if credit notes are erroneously, if the credit notes are erroneously rejected, why credit note? गलती तो सबसे होती है. My original record I erroneously marked as rejected. I should get a credit. I rejected the record. How will I get back the credit? Rejected record travel back to the supplier. Now, supplier has to restate that invoice. Another important thing, again you should be knowing this. In GSTR1 we have a concept called amendment. GSTN has introduced a nil amendment concept. I have issued an invoice to you, rather than accepting you have rejected it. I have paid the tax, I am willing to pay the tax, 3B is still not filed. In my GSTR 1A, I can amend the record. I can amend the record. Earlier, for you to amend a record, it is mandatory. I need to change the invoice number. I need to change some field. I am amending something. But today, amendment, you can call the record and resubmit the record. The moment you resubmit the record, in the same tax period, the invoice is also again coming back to me. The credit can be availed. Now you may ask, दोबारा गलती हो गया. Like, अगले बार भी like accept and reject बगल में थे, मेरा माउस हिल नहीं रहा था, select all किया, फिर से reject दबा दिया. अब दोबारा आपको amendment का मौका नहीं है. So GSTN permits a record can be amended only once. Now if that record has to be amended again, so there has to be either some action by the supplier, change the alphabet, do something, add one paise, some or the other. Now नौटंकी करना पड़ेगा. There is no other option. So first be careful when you are hitting the reject button. दोबारा reject कर रहे हो तो supplier की तरफ से you don't expect. Normal calling and asking someone to change something itself is a challenge. So you will have a scenario where the original records and amended records would be in the same tax period. So if it is in the same tax period, so the action taken on amended record will be prevailing over the action taken on the original record. Okay, this is something you have to see. And before acting on the original invoice, ensure the original invoice is moved from pending to the accepted. You can't keep the original record pending and amended record accepted. It's like you will be thinking why there is an issue with the system, why am I, even though I am hitting this button, my record is not getting accepted. You got to first review the thing. So there will be a scenario where original and amended records are in the same tax period. Original and amended records could also be in a different tax period. गलती से ये tax period में आपने reject किया, then you are going to the supplier. In the next month supplier, he has amended the record and it is coming. So the first and foremost, you have to take, for you to take an action in the IMS now, earlier month 3B has to be filed. So supply, you can't keep it pending saying that I will take an action in the, once the supplier makes an amendment. So you want to take the credit in the current month, but the record of that is there in the next month IMS. So you got to file your current month 3B. So this is another thing you should be knowing. Let's say I am a dealer, let's say I am dealer of some electronic gadgets. I have got the material from my supplier. 1 crore, 8 crore ka maal aaya hai, 18 lakhs my credit is there, and with a margin of 5% I am giving it to my distributors and other shops. Every month, all that I will be paying in cash is on that 5 lakhs. That 90,000 is what I will be paying in the cash. Rest I will be taking it in credit. Now that one invoice which has come 18 lakh credited, outward liability there are multiple invoices. Now if my inward invoice is rejected, the ITC is rejected, supplier has filed, everything is done, I cannot wait saying that next month he will be filing the invoice in the amendment month. I will take the credit into the previous month. Answer is no. You will have to file the return of the current month, go to the next month and avail the credit. This is the another issue you will see. This might appear to be very conceptual at this point, but actually dealers are going to face this. It is our duty to educate them. So when a record is rejected by the recipient, before filing R1 or after filing R1, both can be amended. But you need to know if it is before filing the R1, so it is there in the same month thing. If it is filed in R1, wait till he does the 3B, it can be done in 1 year. But any action done in 1 year. Another thing you should note, if any action done in 1 year with respect to new record, that will be in the next month 2B. So if the action done for the same record with an amendment, it is there in the current month IMS and 2B. A new record that is entered, it is again in the next month 2B. Like imagine that supplier who is from whom I am buying, he forgot to report my invoice. You went back and said, why आपने report ही नहीं किया, मेरा credit कैसे आएगा? So he will now add it in his 1 year. Even though he is added is in 1 year, it will not be eligible for a credit for you in this month. It will be as a credit for you in the next month. So now important question you will ask me, sir credit नहीं है 2B में. Now liability तो दिख रही है, मेरा actual liability is only 90,000. Now since the ITC is not there, will I now end up paying 18 lakh 90,000? So till how many months I will be offsetting this credit if I avail it in the next month? This is an important thing that you should be wondering how will you handle it, right? Now, if the rejection is done erroneously, as I said, you have to contact. Now let's look at another scenario, quarterly taxpayers. You have a payment, it is quarterly returns but the monthly payment. The payment you had these two options. So you will be manually netting off your deemed liability and credits and you will be making the payment. So that is another thing you should be keeping it in mind. Next, the generation of 2B. This is the important thing. You will not be able to file your GST or 3B unless you file your 2B. Currently there was no concept of filing 2B. There's like credit of 2B was automatically populating to 3B. The credit of 2B will be coming to your 3B only when you recompute your GST or 2B. So this is another step that has come in. So compliance is going to go up, it is not going to come down. But you are moving into an era where a clear distinction that is made. There is a set of the tax practitioners, the chartered accountants who are doing only the compliance practice. You need to definitely have the systems and tools. Now you may say that the team under me are the one who are doing. They also have to have a system and the tool to handle this automatically. Now what will happen to GST or 2A? In midst of all this IMS and 2B जितने discuss कर रहे हैं, 2A का relevance क्या है? I will always tell people that 2A is relevant at any given point in time. Because 2A goes on an accrual basis. If you want to know your purchases for the financial year 23-24, you will always have to see your GST or 2A. Because 2A is on an accrual, it's a mirror replica. Unfortunately, your table 8 of GSTR 9 has moved from 2A to 2B. Technically, there is no relevance of table 8. If one of the representation that we have to give to the government, we should first tell, please remove that table. It is waste of time of all the intellectual professionals. Next, values in 2A are irrespective of action taken in IMS. Values in 2B are based on IMS action. Values in GSTR 2A is irrespective of the action taken in IMS. Whether you rejected a record, accepted a record or deemed accepted, your 2A will be there. So 2A will be treated as your purchase register. We have seen about 2B recompute. Can I amend a forward charge invoice into an RCM? Like while reporting into my R1, I have reported it as a forward charge liability. Only when I saw in my GSTR 3B, I saw there is a liability coming in. I want to go to GSTR 1A and change that. The moment you take an action, forward charge to the reverse charge, it would be originally, let's say you have accepted it as a credit, that credit gets reversed in your IMS. So in IMS, even the IMS is not final. That is another thing you should know. That after taking an action, सामने वाला वो invoice को change कर दिया. आपका IMS भी overwritten. So you are thinking that there is a credit that is going to come because he changed the record from forward charge to the reverse charge. Even that credit would be traveling out of IMS. Now the only thing you should know is कुछ ना कुछ change होता रहेगा. Nothing value जो मेरे को सामने दिख रहा है वो सही है. You can't rely on that. And उस basis पे आप ये नहीं बोल सकते हो कल की liability इतना था आज इतना क्यों हो गया. Is that you can't shout on that poor junior who is doing some reconciliation. He himself also don't know why the change happened yesterday. मैंने reconciliation कर दिया हूँ. ये कल की reconciliation है match हो रही. आज record क्यों नहीं है? आगे सामने वाले ने he has made the change. So that there would be another change that would be happening. So the last thing is GSTR 3B changes. I know now it's closer to the lunch time. GSTR 3B is going to get locked. This is something I want you to get. The GSTR 3B is going to get locked. If 3B is getting locked, what is the first impact? They are likely to lock the GSTR 1 related liability. Original plan was Jan 25, but this is changed. So maybe you can treat it as April. Is there any time limit to impact the lock? Answer is no, because you have time till 30th November. So financial year के बाद lock कर दो. Those are actually has no relevance. But outward related liability is going to get locked. This is another thing that you need to be knowing. Invoice management system is the key thing. Like you think that you understood the law, you understood the tables of GSTR 3B, suddenly those tables gets changed. You understood now 1, 2B, 3B मेरा जिंदगी है, 2B हट गया, IMS आ गया. कब तक चलेगा? Till you understand IMS, you understood okay now I know how returns कैसे फाइल करना है. Then तब नया कुछ हो जाएगा. So you need to be very clear that currently the future of GST returns is IMS. बस आज की डेट में खाली उतना है. कल क्या होगा मुझे तो मुझे पता नहीं. So with this note, I come to end of the session and thank you for giving me.
I can tell you for sure that this must have been the most challenging session for any speaker, not because it is before lunch, but because of the fact that this is an evolving concept. I think that the GST Council and the GST itself is not aware about how it is going to unfold. One thing is for sure, whether it is good or bad or whatever, but it is certainly very, very ambitious and we do not know how it is going to unfold. Yes, that's my sir.
So since it is compliance related, if you have any question, maybe one or two you can take.
So if there are any questions, we can take, and he is kind enough to ensure that he has leeway of 1 or 2 minutes also. So if any questions we can take, or otherwise we can take it up offline during the lunch also.
Just one announcement. The kits you can collect from the counters there. और lunch का दोनों side counter है. So at both the side we have the counters today so that there is no rush. But we have a limited time of 45 minutes. So please assemble in the hall within 40 minutes because we'll start on time at 2:45. Thank you.